The Subcommittee on Information Technology and the Subcommittee on Government Operations will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Each year, the federal government spends $80 billion on IT, and 80% of that spending is on old, outdated legacy systems. It's not a secret that the IT acquisition and procurement process in the federal government is broken. In June, we held a hearing examining GAO's designation of IT acquisition as high risk and highlighted how FITARA can reduce IT acquisition risk over time and eliminate wasteful spending. Federal agencies have now had nearly 1 year since the law's enactment and 4 months since the issuance of OMB's guidance to implement this law. This hearing continues an ongoing effort on the part of this committee to improve how the federal government goes about buying, maintaining, and ultimately retiring information technology. In June, I had stated that while FITARA is not a panacea for all IT acquisition problems, it can be a useful tool to make real progress in reducing the risk of these large investments. I still strongly believe this today. This morning, we released a scorecard grading federal agencies on 4 of the 7 key metrics of FITARA: data center consolidation, IT portfolio review savings or portfolio stat, incremental development or CIO authority enhancements, and risk assessment transparency. The committee worked in a bipartisan fashion to develop metrics that fairly assess the progress agencies are making in these areas and then task GAO to gather the data. To be clear, this is not data that we ourselves came up with. The data that was used to compute these grades is largely self-reported by agencies of Congress and OMB. While it is clear from looking at these grades that no agency gets a gold star and goes to the head of the class, some agencies, and we have one of them here today, are making progress. Frankly, though, there is a reason that no agency received an A. We have work to do. One area in particular that stands out to me is the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative. The consolidation of federal data centers not only has the potential for tremendous cost savings, upwards of $7.4 billion according to the GAO, but we have very real impacts on the cybersecurity posture of federal agencies. We as a federal government simply cannot afford to continue spending $80 billion or more on legacy systems year after year after year and expect to keep pace with industry, provide services to the American people, and keep our data secure. We cannot afford to be having the same discussion about IT management and acquisition in another 20 years. Federal agencies should be put on notice that Congress will not sit by the wayside and allow the law to be skirted. No agency will be exempt from this law. But if agency CIOs will simply implement FITARA, meaning they actually make progress in consolidating data centers, find savings through the portfolio stat process, move away from big bang acquisitions to incremental development, and accurately assess risks, we won't be. I said this in June, and I want to reiterate it here. I look forward to working with the leadership and members of the IT and government operations subcommittees on both sides of the aisle and with agency CIOs to continue to advance the cause of good IT governance. We have to get it right this time. And I'd like to yield the balance of my time to the chairman of the full committee, Jason Chaffetz.
Thank you, and I appreciate the time. I want to thank you, Chairman Hurd. I also want to thank Chairman Meadows for paying such close attention to this. This is done in a very bipartisan way with the ranking members Conley and Kelly. I also appreciate Mr. Cummings and the work he's done and the approach that we're doing together, because it truly has been a bipartisan effort and needs to continue that way. It's important for federal agencies to make sure that we're questioning the results on the scorecard. It's not a partisan issue, and the committee's grades are based on self-reported data, which is an important part of understanding where we are today. The scorecard that was unveiled this morning is an effort to make clear to CIOs, agency leadership, and the American people that the committee intends to ensure that this law is implemented correctly and fully. As Chairman Hurd mentioned in his opening statement, we cannot afford to keep on spending to the tune of $80 billion a year in perpetuating outdated legacy technologies. Since I was elected to Congress, same time that President Obama was elected to the White House, the federal government has spent more than $525 billion on IT, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Too many vulnerabilities, too many stories of agencies with old, outdated legacy systems where we're taking young 20-year-olds and trying to teach them how to do things that were invented literally in the 1950s. Again, the examples of COBOL and other types of technology, while great in the mid-1950s, well before many of us were even born on this dais, we still continue to implement them and use them within the federal government. That needs to change. There is a reason that the committee held a hearing on the GAO's high-risk list, and there's a reason that the IT acquisition was on it. Information technology is the infrastructure of our future. It's supposed to make life better. It's supposed to make life more secure, more simple, more swift. I'm getting tired, quite frankly, of asking the federal government for basic documents and hearing that it's going to take years to produce them, when the Microsoft Corporation and others have figured out a way to access an email within seconds. Those excuses have come and gone, and technology is our friend. It's supposed to be here to help us, but it also needs to be safe and secure. Ultimately, FITARA is an effort to ensure that agencies are buying and developing technologies in an efficient way that is transparent and gets agencies the tools they need to do the work for the American people. Look forward to the hearing and the testimony today. We've got good witnesses today. Appreciate the 5 of you for being here, what you provide and your perspectives and all that you're trying to do, and with, I think, the same goals and direction that we all here are doing. And I, again, appreciate the bipartisan work and look forward to the hearing. Yield back.
I now recognize my friend and ranking member, Ms. Kelly. She's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Information Technology, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing is the second hearing in a series of oversight hearings the subcommittee will hold on FITARA implementation to help ensure agencies achieve the desired goals of the law and generate opportunities for government savings and efficiency in the procurement of information technology. FITARA includes a number of government-wide reforms for managing IT acquisitions and portfolios that will help ensure that the federal government is making wise and efficient investments in IT. This hearing will help us understand the status of implementation of FITARA and how agencies are doing on 4 important initiatives required by FITARA that could quickly improve the management of IT and save taxpayer dollars. Agency-wide IT portfolio review and data center consolidation are 2 provisions of FITARA that can quickly help agencies reduce spending, optimize IT resources, and ensure IT investments align with agencies' mission and business functions. This committee plays an important oversight role that can increase transparency and accountability of agency implementation efforts. Earlier this year, the committee tasked the Government Accountability Office with assessing and scoring agencies' implementation of 4 initiatives required by FITARA, including portfolio review and data center consolidation. As the Chairman said, today we released the FITARA scorecard results, and we'll discuss the performance of the 3 agencies here today. While these 3 agencies were selected for this initial scorecard hearing, I hope the subcommittees will continue to hold hearings with all agencies to measure their performance and hold them accountable for fully implementing FITARA provisions. These hearings and the FITARA scorecard show the committee's interest and commitment to achieving the goals of FITARA, as well as present an opportunity for agencies to demonstrate their effort to generate savings and efficiencies in the management of IT resources. Today's agencies are working with OMB to assess their current structure for managing IT resources and develop a plan for implementing the specific authorities that FITARA provides Chief Information Officers. Agencies are required to notify OMB of any obstacles to implementation and work with OMB to overcome those obstacles. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses on the status of FITARA implementation and the challenges agencies are facing in overhauling the management of IT resources. I want to thank each of the witnesses for testifying today, and I look forward to hearing your testimony on how agencies are approaching FITARA implementation and the desired goals of savings and efficiency in the management of IT. Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly, and I want to thank you for the bipartisan nature in which we're doing this important work. Now it's great to recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Government Operations, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership, both of you, on this particular issue, and thank each of you for being here today. Obviously, in February, the GAO added the federal IT management to the list of high risk. categories. You've heard it, the chairman of the full committee talked about the $80 billion that we spend on IT. Actually, if you look at all the amounts of monies that are what I would say offline and not accounted for, it's in excess of $100 billion, and that may be a conservative figure. So as we look at this is a critical issue, as the GAO found all too often that this $80 to $100 billion was invested, and many times it was behind schedule. We didn't get the ultimate product that was even contracted for. I was troubled to learn. I am one of those that was born a little bit earlier than what the chairman of the full committee had recommended, but I was real concerned to hear that we're still supporting COBOL and Fortran. Those were languages that I had a difficult time with in college, and yet here we are with my gray hair still supporting those kinds of legacy programming that even anybody who is remotely in the programming world would say, why in the world are you doing it? And so we have got to do a better job. Obviously, with regards to FITARA and the implementation thereof, we're going to, in a very bipartisan way, work with not only the chairman of this committee, but the ranking members of both of our committees. I can tell you that the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, and I have had a number of conversations as it relates to FITARA. And this is the beginning. I think the other part of this is the scorecards is actually a good start. Many of us asked why there was no A's on there, as the chairman was, and the concern that I have was the response that I got was that even some of those grades that were given have been given the benefit of the doubt. And so as we look at going forward and making progress, this tool should not only be one that we not allow a law to be implemented and just address, but we need to go further than that, as we need to look at appropriations for those that are doing well, that we need to make sure that those funds get rewarded for those that are doing well. Because too often in the federal government, those who are efficient and effective get their budgets cut instead of getting rewarded for the very behavior that we're trying to support. And we have to do a better job of recognizing good behavior and rewarding it. I believe that this is a great start. I look forward to continuing our work with not only the GAO but OMB as we look at implementing this, and it will be a priority for us in a bipartisan way to address that. And with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to recognize the architect of the ISA Conley, or is it Conley ISA? Yeah, I always forget. Bill, Mr. Conley, the gentleman from Virginia, ranking member of the Subcommittee on Government Operations, for his opening statement.
I thank the chairman, and I thank him for his generosity and his perspicacity. Well, welcome. I'm so glad we're here. We're finally here. And we're talking about the implementation of the FITARA legislation. The bipartisan legislation represents the first major reform of laws governing federal IT management and procurement since the Clinger-Cohen Act of 1996. And although that previous effort established a solid foundation, it fell short in achieving its full potential because, frankly, nobody was watching its implementation. And I hope today's panel hearing of these two subcommittees and the leadership on both sides of the aisle suggests we're not going to let that happen, FITARA. We mean it. We want to see it implemented. And we understand that this is the first interim report card. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's a progress report. I've been encouraged at how quickly the administration and federal agencies have actually embraced the effort. And I really appreciate the leadership of Federal CIO and Office of CIOs and the Office of Management and Budget, especially Mr. Scott, which I think issued some of the best implementation guidelines I've ever seen coming out of OMB. And GAO, similarly, in designating improving the management of IT acquisitions operations as a new government-wide high-risk area, really helps pound the case home. This is important. It gets our attention, and hopefully it gets our colleagues within the executive branch their attention as well. I'm actually pleased by the results of a recent survey of federal IT professionals conducted by Meritalk, which was a private-public partnership focused on improving government use of IT, that shows that nearly 80% of those surveyed within the federal government believe FITARA will actually have a positive effect on the value of their agency's IT and mission. That's great. They specifically cited its potential to reduce duplicative IT systems and to address the legacy systems my good friend from North Carolina was addressing just a few minutes ago, although I will point out to him, the value, at least of COBOL, is the Chinese don't know how to hack into it. Whoops. Late breaking news, apparently they do. That would be too bad. Today we're going to release our initial scorecard focusing on 4 of those reform activities that kind of constitute what grade you get and why. Data center consolidation, where we're not doing so well, IT portfolio review savings, incremental project development and delivery, and risk assessment transparency. These metrics were selected because their implementation will have a demonstrable benefit on IT acquisitions and operations, and this data is updated and available on a quarterly basis. GAO has already been gathering information from agencies themselves to verify reporting in some of these areas, so the committee tasked GAO with collecting the agency's self-reported information and then scoring it based on our direction. So this is sort of a self-certification process, too, that we're relying on, and so is GAO. I want to caution my colleagues, our partners in the administration, and others in the federal IT community that this scorecard is not intended to be a juridical prescriptive exercise. It should not be considered a scarlet letter on the back of a federal agency. It is, as I said earlier, an initial assessment, a point-in-time snapshot, much like the quarterly report card one might get in a university or in a school. The intent isn't to punish or stigmatize. It is, in fact, to exhort and urge agencies to seize this opportunity and use the scorecard as a management tool to better guide decision-making and investments within the agency. While the grades themselves are illustrative of overall performance, it's the multiple elements that make up the grades on which agencies in our committee will focus to ensure we deliver on the transformative promise of FITARA. For example, while the Department of Transportation may be the lower end of the scores on certain areas right now, one is encouraged by reading CIO McKinney's prepared statement in which he says IT is no longer just the business of the CIO, rather it's everybody's business. Well, to me, hallelujah. I mean, the gospel is spreading, and that's a good thing because it gets in our heads. That's exactly the point. I also commend DOT on its efforts to implement a more holistic approach to planning its IT investments by including budget and acquisition staff in its decision-making process to ensure everyone understands how those decisions need to support the overall IT goals. GSA has similar arrangement with its investment review board, and Treasury employs a best practice model of IT information resource management. All good things. So the one area I am concerned about, and I know Mr. Powder and I have talked about this, and we covered this in a field hearing under your predecessor, Mr. Meadows, Mr. Micah, that was at George Mason University in Northern Virginia. So we start out roughly with Vivek Kundra's 25-point plan that says, let's take 1,600 identified data centers in the federal government and cut it in half. Goal, 800. We introduced a bill that said, well, once we do that, let's get it cut in half again to 400. We have a field hearing a couple of years later, and what do we discover? Well, we didn't quite cut it in half. We discovered 6,100 more. So we went from 1,600 to 7,700, and I believe we've just discovered another 2,000. So now we have 8,700, roughly. There's no way any of us can find that acceptable. I'm glad we're more accurate, apparently, in knowing how many data centers we have. But the game here is to consolidate, to save, to become more efficient, to get rid of the stovepipes within our agencies and between agencies. So I'm very interested in hearing, especially that one, how are we going to make progress? How are we going to avoid discovering? I mean, if there are more to be discovered, fine. but the real goal here is to consolidate. And so that one particularly I'm going to be focused on. At any rate, I want to thank my colleagues for holding this hearing. I want to thank all of you for being here. This is the first down payment in a series of oversight hearings I know we're going to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. I will hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any members who would like to submit a written statement. We will now recognize our panel of witnesses. I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Tony Scott, the U.S. Chief Information Officer at the Office of E-Government and Information Technology at the Office of Management and Budget. Mr. Soni Bagawalia, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Department of Treasury. Mr. Richard McKinney, CIO at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Mr. David Shive, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. General Services Administration, and Mr. David Powner, Director of IT Management Issues at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Welcome to you all, and pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify. So please rise and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please be seated. And let the record reflect that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. In order to allow time for discussion, we would appreciate if you would limit your testimony to 5 minutes, and your entire written statement will be made part of the record. Mr. Scott, you've had a busy few months. Welcome back to this hearing space, and you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd, Ranking Member Kelly, Chairman Meadows, Ranking Member Connolly, and members of the subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss OMB's work in overseeing the government-wide implementation of the Federal Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act. And thank you for your resolute and bipartisan efforts in ensuring that this critical law is implemented successfully. When I last appeared before you, I offered an overview of how FITARA and OMB's implementation guidance enables strategic partnerships among agency CIOs and other senior leaders in the agency. And today I'll focus my remarks on the progress that's been made in institutionalizing FITARA and how OMB is facilitating and overseeing its implementation. OMB's FITARA guidance uses a common baseline approach, which provides direction on the roles and responsibilities of agency CIOs and other leaders for the management of information technology. Each FITARA-covered agency submitted a self-assessment to OMB describing their current operation compared to the common baseline, and are on schedule to submit an implementation plan showing how they will implement the common baseline requirements by the end of the year. Agency plans were evaluated with 4 overarching questions in mind. Has the agency identified real breakthrough opportunities for change? Has the agency described a compelling and feasible plan to act on those changes? Does the detailed plan integrate agency leadership with the leadership of bureaus and programs to jointly drive the mission? And finally, does the agency CIO serve as the single point of accountability for the roles and responsibilities identified in the common baseline? And let me assure you that there was no rubber stamp process involved here. With each agency, we've been actively engaged. Our analysis of the initial agency plan submissions revealed several key themes, including but not limited to agency-specific issues in budget formulation, budget execution, and IT acquisition. And we're working actively with each agency to address these issues for their final plan. Our oversight of agency progress in implementing FITARA is being assisted through a number of additional means. We're fostering a government-wide community by holding biweekly meetings on FITARA and by relaunching the website management.cio.gov to serve as a central location for tools and resources. We're collaborating with the President's Management Council, the CIO Council, GSA, and other organizations to facilitate knowledge sharing across the federal enterprise. We're enabling consistent and transparent oversight by requiring that each agency post their implementation plan and related FITARA materials on management.cio.gov. And this will enable OMB, Inspectors General, Congress, GAO, and the public to conduct consistent oversight and follow-up. And we're requiring agencies that have a red CIO risk evaluation on the IT dashboard for 3 consecutive months to hold TechStat sessions and notify OMB of these sessions. Finally, I want to highlight the work that my office is doing in partnership with OMB's Office of Federal Procurement Policy to leverage FITARA in addressing complex federal acquisitions challenges. We recently issued a category management policy to improve the acquisition and management of laptops and desktops. This memo is the first of a series of policies directing agencies to take new steps to improve the acquisition of common goods and services to drive better performance and efficiencies as required by FITARA. In conclusion, I think FITARA presents a historic opportunity to reform the management of information technology across the Federal Government. It's important that we do not underestimate the work and the commitment required by agencies and the broader ecosystem to fully implement this law and the changes it represents in culture, governance, IT processes, business process, and quite frankly, the way we do oversight. Simply replaying pages from our old playbook is not the solution. That said, I'm pleased with agencies' promising work to date, and I look forward to the positive results to come as agencies apply FITARA to their full information system lifecycle. I thank the subcommittee for holding this hearing and for your commitment to ensuring successful implementation of FITARA. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Bagawalia, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chairman Hurd, Ranking Member Kelly, Chairman Meadows, Ranking Member Connolly, Chairman Shafetz, and members of the subcommittees, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Department of Treasury's approach to the Federal Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act, or FITARA. I will focus on how our evolving Office of the Chief Information Officer practices have laid a strong foundation for the implementation of FITARA. I also acknowledge there is much work to do. I will highlight some of these practices, including the roles of the OCIO in managing the Treasury Department's information technology, IT, and information resource management portfolio, and the governance structure that the Department has in place to ensure sound IT IRM decision-making and delivery. The 3 top OCIO management priorities for the Department of Treasury are cybersecurity, making improvements to the IT IRM operations, and FITARA. Treasury works each day to deliver the diverse mission of the Department both securely and reliably, and to build upon what we think is a strong foundation that positions the Department for further successes in the future. Treasury supports an important financial mission for our country. Treasury is comprised of departmental offices and bureaus of wide-ranging size with varying technology needs and complexities and a number of different funding sources. The Treasury CIO is accountable for meeting the IT IRM needs of the departmental offices with special attention to advancing the enterprise-wide objectives. Responsibility for IT IRM management is shared among the Treasury CIO and bureau-level CIOs who focus on the unique mission and needs of the individual organizations. Treasury is fully dedicated to implementing FITARA in accordance with OMB's guidelines and the Department's needs. Our self-assessment against the common baseline established by OMB demonstrates that we have a number of practices already in place, but that many of these need to be formalized through policy, and we acknowledge that there are many areas that still need to improve. Treasury's focus is sustainability, which means that integrating these goals of FITARA into existing processes to ensure efficiencies can last over time. The existing IT IRM lifecycle is built upon GAO and OMB's best practice framework of architect, invest, implement, and operate with cybersecurity built in throughout the lifecycle. Treasury uses this framework to further policy and process development and includes consistent practices in the following 5 areas. Number 1, governance. The Department has a GAO-recognized best practice approach to efficient and effective review of its IT IRM investments. Each bureau reports execution data to the Department monthly. Treasury then reviews all investment with month-to-month performance issues in project execution and conducts a detailed program review called TechStat on select investments. In addition, the Department CIO conducts quarterly performance reviews with each bureau and participates in quarterly portfolio stat reviews with OMB. Number 2, budget formulation and planning. The Department CIO actually annually reviews all bureau ITIRM plans and participates in full bureau budget reviews. The Treasury CIO Council also selects a group of enterprise-wide initiatives to be executed jointly. Efficiencies such as those gained through data center consolidation have allowed Treasury to begin to shift more spending to development, modernization, and enhancement, DM&E efforts. Number 3, acquisition and execution. The senior procurement executive, SPE, and the CIO have worked collaboratively to conduct a joint review of department offices' ITIRM procurements, as well as select acquisitions of major enterprise programs. Treasury is also developing a department-wide procurement strategy and governance program to ensure enterprise-wide oversight and to leverage economies of scale in procuring commodity ITIRM where possible. Number 4, in workforce and organization, the Treasury CIO has input into Bureau CIO selections, places performance objectives in Bureau CIO annual performance plans, and contributes to Bureau CIO evaluations. Number 5, project management. Beginning in FY15, Treasury OCIO launched 2 initiatives to improve project management oversight and practice. Number 1, develop a new enterprise-wide lifecycle management program, and 2, a revised program management approach to better leverage agile development methods. Per OMB's recent portfolio stat review we just received, Treasury has made significant progress in shifting towards a more agile development approach, but work remains. In conclusion, while Treasury has a strong foundation on which to successfully implement FITARA, we acknowledge there is still work to do. The Department is committed to fully implementing FITARA and looks forward to working with OMB, GAO, and the Congress in this endeavor. Thank you for your support for FITARA, a key initiative which will improve public stewardship. I appreciate this opportunity to testify today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Mr. McKinney, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Hurd, Ranking Member Kelly, Chairman Meadows, Ranking Member Connolly, members of the subcommittee, I want to begin by thanking you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss DOT's implementation of FITARA. I would also like to thank both this committee and your predecessors for having the foresight to recognize the critical importance of clarifying and strengthening the role of Chief Information Officer. FITARA provides both the accountability and the authority that is required for a CIO and an IT organization to be successful. I believe this landmark legislation must be used as the foundation for the complete transformation in the way the federal government builds, buys, manages, and secures information technology. And I think you have very wisely given us FITARA at an extremely critical juncture. Let me explain why. I began my IT career in 1985 just as governments were eagerly moving away from the centralized, one-size-fits-all model characteristic of the early mainframe days. This rapid decentralization continued through the 1990s, but increasingly this patchwork quilt of disconnected IT silos and disparate technologies began to reveal its weakness as we moved into the connected age of the Internet. And governments at all levels across this country have struggled with how to unwind this mess that we have allowed to build up. Tearing down the silos is not an easy thing to do. We all understand how the status quo has a lot of inertia, and so it is at DOT. I was appointed CIO at DOT a little over 2 years ago, and I immediately recognized. I began by having a frank and honest conversation with both the departmental leadership and the operating administrations about the challenges that we faced. I could tell that everyone recognized that what I was saying was true. But I also understood that in order to lead them through a difficult transformation, that we first had to strengthen the office of the CIO. I wish I could tell you that this process was quick and easy to do, but it wasn't. But after more than a year of hiring, reorganizing, and improving service delivery, the Department's confidence in our office quickly improved. And why is that important? It is precisely because we have to make such a radical and difficult turn, abandoning the decentralized approach and moving toward a strong and secure enterprise shared services approach. This shared services model should manage the 60% to 70% of our current IT landscape that is commodity IT. The network, server, storage, desktop, help desk, messaging service, all the enterprise services that can be provided as a centralized utility in a well-managed mixture of both cloud and locally hosted services. This balanced approach would leave the mission-specific solutions to be managed at the component level and specifically aligned to their unique business needs. And with the cost sprawl of decentralized infrastructure contained, we would free more resources to improve the applications that help us achieve our mission goals. There is even one more compelling reason to make this radical change, and that is security. In our current decentralized model, visibility across our network is inconsistent, lines of defense are often less than clear, and coordination and effectiveness of our security efforts are severely impacted. Even if we managed a perfectly architected IT infrastructure, securing that infrastructure against our enemies would still be a very difficult task. But that should be our singular goal. We must create a new construct that is secure by design, one where security is built in and not bolted on. So how do we begin to use the three foundational authorities of FITARA, namely HR, budget, and acquisition approval, that you have wisely laid out in this legislation? I'm sure we can all agree that in order to chart a course to where you want to go, you must begin by understanding where you are. I have been frustrated by the lack of good data, both technical and financial, that we have to measure our IT spend and performance. Just as our physical IT has been siloed, so has our data. For too long, my office has been merely an aggregator of component data that we report to GAO and OMB, only to find out later that the taxonomy and structure varies from one OA to the next. So one of our first steps is teaming with the CFO office and asking the operating administrations to join us in building a new taxonomy that consistently and accurately identifies and quantifies our IT spend. You can't manage what you can't measure. Let me close with this. I want you to know that I am totally dedicated to ensuring that the rollout of these important authorities is done as quickly and as successfully as I know how to do. I believe that we have to approach FITARA as if it were our last chance to get this right. Again, thank you for FITARA. Thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering whatever questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney, for your insightful testimony. Please give my personal regards to the Secretary, if you would.
Yes, sir, I will do that.
Mr. Shive, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Meadows, Ranking Members Kelly and Connolly, and members of the subcommittees.
If you can bring that mic a little bit closer to you there.
How's that?
All right, that's better.
Great. Thank you for inviting me to testify before you regarding GSA's implementation of the Federal Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act. GSA appreciates this committee's oversight of this important issue and the importance of addressing the high-risk areas outlined by the Government Accountability Office in its assessment. Today, I would like to highlight GSA's efforts towards implementing the common baseline of FITARA. These efforts address a variety of activities, from centralizing IT management to the optimization of data centers, all of which are helping us to move closer to successfully complying with the requirements of FITARA. 3 years ago, GSA conducted a top-to-bottom review of the agency, and as a result of that, consolidated IT management under the CIO and put effective management controls in place to centralize our IT spending. Since this consolidation, GSA has improved IT acquisition and security, and we are implementing additional reforms, many of which were directed by FITARA. For example, as GSA's CIO, I oversee and regularly participate in the governance of operations and delivery of IT services for the entire agency. All instructional letters, policy directives, and formal guidance are published under my signature. Initiatives with an IT component are reviewed by me or my delegates. This is made possible through my representation on governance boards around the agency, such as our Investment Review Board, and through our agency's IT management processes. GSA's consolidation efforts also helped my office gain visibility spending and investments. From fiscal years 2013 to 2015, GSA IT reduced its budget by 17%. This is in part due to the fact that since our consolidation, I am intimately involved with the review, management, and oversight of IT expenditures from the initial budget request to the execution and completion of each project. To achieve this, my office conducts high-risk investment reviews, project health checks, benefits realization, application rationalization, and we authorize reprogramming of funds and rebaselining of IT investments. All of these help with ensuring that, as CIO, I have a role in investment and project management oversight, which are primary goals of FITARA. Additionally, to ensure that IT investments within various GSA divisions are aligned with the long-term IT vision of the agency, my office collaborates with the various business lines within GSA to provide guidance and support. The IT executives supporting these offices report directly to me and formulate technology solutions and manage IT investments with clear understanding of GSA IT enterprise management requirements and clear direction from the CIO. Another initiative that has been central to reducing our costs and is part of the requirements necessary for agencies to properly implement FITARA are activities surrounding the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative. As a part of FDCCI, GSA IT has reduced its overall number of data centers by 65% and consolidated their functionality to the agency's core data centers. This consolidation has saved or avoided costs totaling approximately $29 million from fiscal year 2012 through 2014. Currently, GSA operates 3 core data centers as well as multiple regional data centers. GSA's IT's future goal is to consolidate all core data centers and regional data centers into 3 primary data centers. Through consolidation and by driving efficiency into the GSA computing enterprise, GSA has increased the usability of our systems, eliminated duplicative processes, eliminated duplicative systems and applications, and standardized our processes using industry best practices and solutions. While GSA has made significant progress in implementing the key components of FITARA, there is still more work to be done. As GSA moves forward with FITARA implementation, I will continue to work with GSA senior agencies officials, OMB, my peer Federal agency CIOs, and members of this committee to ensure that GSA is effectively implementing FITARA to reduce costs and increase the value of our IT acquisitions. I thank the subcommittees for the opportunity to testify today and look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you so much. Mr. Powner, good to have you back with us. You are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Meadows, Hurd, Ranking Members Connolly and Kelly, I would like to first thank you for your leadership on the implementation of FITARA with your first set of grades. Your initial focus on improving transparency of the projects on the dashboard, delivering in smaller increments, and holding agencies accountable for savings on data center closings and duplicative spending will greatly help agencies with their implementation efforts. I'd like to briefly comment on each of the 4 areas on your scorecard, starting with incremental development. FITARA requires that CIOs certify that IT investments deliver in increments consistent with OMB policy, which requires that major investments deliver in 6 months. Agencies such as VA, GSA, and EPA do a good job in this area. Agencies self-report that overall 58% of the projects in development are planning to deliver in 6 months. Our ongoing work for this committee shows that this number greatly overstates the extent to which agencies are delivering incrementally. Therefore, grades in this area for some agencies are too high and may need a downward adjustment in the future. Next, dashboard transparency. FITARA codified the IT dashboard and CIO risk ratings for the approximately 750 major investments across the departments. These ratings simply say whether each investment is low, medium, or high risk. The dashboard tells us that about 160 investments totaling about $10.5 billion is moderate or high risk, and that 76% of the IT dollars the government invests in is low risk. These totals are nowhere near reality given the troubled IT acquisitions and the old antiquated legacy systems the government has. CIOs need to be more transparent and accurate in this area, and our ongoing work will show that many of these CIO ratings are not acknowledging risk appropriately. Agency CIO ratings that do acknowledge a fair amount of risk include Commerce and EPA. Next, portfolio stat. FITARA requires that agencies review their IT portfolios and address waste and duplication. When OMB first started this effort, there were over 200 initiatives totaling nearly $6 billion in planned savings. However, our latest report showed that the baseline is much lower, and there has been inconsistent reporting to GAO, OMB, and the Congress. Some agencies like SSA and Treasury have reported significant savings. We have over 60 recommendations to OMB and agencies in this area, and FITARA and your grades will help refocus needed attention here. Next, data center consolidation. This is the big dollar savings area. FITARA requires annual publicly reported updates on savings. Our ongoing review for this committee highlights the importance of this section of the law. 2,100 more data centers are now being reported to us for a total of 11,700 centers. Representative Connolly, you missed one update in the baseline. We were at about 9,600, and now we're at 11,700. Over 3,300 have been closed to date, and the government plans to close an additional 2,000 centers. Over $2.5 billion have been saved, and there's another $5.5 billion on the table. So in total, the government plans to close 5,000 centers and save about $8 billion. Mr. Chairman, this $8 billion total should actually be much higher since some agencies have lowballed their targets, and not all agencies have new cost estimates in. The top 5 agencies in data center savings are Treasury, DOD, DHS, Transportation, and Commerce. I'd like to comment on the data sources used to grade agencies. It's not perfect, as we've discussed, but it's the best data available. Agencies own it, and they need to get it right. The data primarily comes from the IT dashboard and the quarterly savings reports submitted to the appropriation committees. We believe your grades and oversight will greatly improve the accuracy of the data and attention to these areas, and ultimately more progress. In addition, our reviews will highlight where agency self-reporting is inaccurate. A critical and additional area where oversight is needed with your scorecard in the future, as we have discussed, the CIO authorities. We would recommend a close review of the FITARA implementation plans when approved and whether CIOs are exercising their enhanced authorities. Until these authorities are strengthened significantly, agencies will struggle to comprehensively implement FITARA. I would like to thank Tony Scott for his leadership, specifically on enhancing the transparency by making the FITARA implementation plans publicly available, his recent strategic sourcing enhancements associated with desktop purchases, and calling for more focus and attention on GAO's IT recommendations. Chairman Meadows, Ranking Members Connolly and Kelly, thank you again for your leadership. We look forward to working with you further on your scorecard and oversight.
Thank you so much. The Chair will recognize himself for 5 minutes to follow up, I guess, on our opening statement. So I want to just thank all 5 of you for your illuminating testimony. I guess for me, part of this would piggyback on what I had highlighted during our opening remarks, and that would be, as we look at savings, what incentive is there for you to save and be efficient, only to give the money back to someone else or back to the General Treasury where it gets reallocated or reappropriated to somebody else? Is there a real incentive for you to do that? Mr. McKinney, you want to weigh in on that?
Be glad to. I was music to my ears when you said that, because I absolutely believe that not only do I need to drive down cost, I need to drive up service delivery and improvement of delivery of services. And if we can have an ongoing conversation about how we can incentivize people, when they drive down their cost, that there's that reinvestment opportunity and transparency about that reinvestment opportunity, I think that's a great conversation to have.
So do you think you could work with GAO and OMB as it relates to that? Because one of the concerns I have really has to do with the data that not only you but Treasury and others have put forth. So let me be specific. I mean, when we're talking about savings and reporting those savings to GAO, where we're trying to get a good scorecard, I guess transportation, you had indicated that there was some $77 million savings. But yet when Congress gets a report through OMB and other sources, the savings was only $3 million.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that the $3 million or the $77 million, either one of those is inaccurate, but there is a fly in the ointment somewhere. And so in doing that, we want to save as much as we can, and that you get penalized by Congress when you have saved money. I'm amazed at the amount of fourth quarter spending that goes on around here. I mean, I know it shouldn't be a shock, but it's amazing how many dollars we spend in the fourth quarter saving up for the first three. And so why would you think that there would be an inconsistency there? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Maybe, Mr. Scott, let me come to you and let you answer that question. Why would there be an inconsistency with what is reported in terms of savings through you and then others to Mr. Powner in terms of those same dollar savings?
I'm not sure I have the complete answer. As we've discussed about this topic with various organizations, various agencies, and so on, I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One is some measures that we use here are cost avoidance as well as actual cost savings. So it depends on how you answer the question or how you ask the question, what the answer is.
So is that like saying that someone is going to go to a sale at a supermarket, and because that they decided not to buy something that may have been more expensive, that they've saved that amount of money?
Well, or it could be required increases that are absorbed by existing technology.
All right, so can we get that consistent? Because if that's an inconsistency, it's inconsistent in the definition of what you're reporting to OMB, and then the same that you're reporting to GAO. We're talking about apples and oranges. So that's what you're saying is
It's
definitional.
one of the things that I think we collectively have to work on, that we're using the same measures when we talk about the same thing. And even in the scorecard that I see here, I see differences in the way that OMB is measuring something. And
they're going to be. In fact, I think we've talked to GAO with that. And here's what a lot of the agencies are going to get, the benefit of the doubt today. As we start to refine this and define this, then I would say that the benefit of the doubt and the score, I fully expect some of your scores to go down as we look at this. And that's not going to be very troubling unless it's a trend. And I think that all of us in a bipartisan way are trying to make sure that it's the trend that we're looking at, that we're making progress. And so let me finish up, Mr. McKinney, with one of yours. In your testimony, you highlighted that 70% sweet spot in terms of enterprise systems and so forth. Do you believe that that's the area that you have the most control over in terms of IT expenditures? Because data centers seem like, in the definition of data center, and we've had hearings in this very room on data centers and what they are and what they are not, it seemed like that's where the big number is in terms of savings.
Yes, sir. Not only experience with IT, it's foundational. You know, everything else that you do in IT, you do on top of that foundation. And it's like you got an old house, somebody gives you an old house, where do? You go in the basement. So I'm headed into the basement trying to figure out what's the foundation, what's the plumbing, what's the electrical like, and try to fix that first. I think the most of the money, the savings, is in that, but I also think it's absolutely essential if we're going to build great IT on top of it.
Well, here's what I would offer to each one of the agencies as we start to work with that. If any of you or all of you want to work with us in terms of being more aggressive in terms of data center consolidation and those big numbers, I'll work in a bipartisan way with my colleagues to go to the appropriators and say, listen, we need to give them the benefit of the doubt, whether that's on the authorizing side, but certainly on the appropriating side, and see what we can do. And if you want to reach out to do that, that offer stands. And so the chair would recognize the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Powner, has GAO identified problems with self-reported data in the 4 areas graded in the scorecard?
Yes, we have. So, for instance, on incremental development, you know, there's some agencies that are reporting a very high percentage of projects that they plan to deliver in 6 months. We have some ongoing work on that. We see those percentages much lower when we go in and start looking, you know, underneath the covers on that. So that's an area that I think the grades will go down with some of the data that's not accurate. On the data center front, I think there's some agencies like Treasury and Transportation, they got Fs, but we feel better about their Fs because they have high goals. Okay, so
I bet there are a lot of kids around the country that would say that their parents, they feel better about their Fs.
But But some agencies that have A's and B's with low goals, and they actually have achieved more than their goal, we don't feel so good. So I think those grades are going down, their grades are going to be going up. So it's kind of a mix when you look at the different areas. But again, I think the self-reported and your grades and focus will help with the self-reporting, and hopefully our audits where we're coming behind the numbers will also help get the information right.
Well, have you identified any causes for this behind the issues in self-reported data? Like, what do you think the causes are?
Well, I think on data centers, for instance, the last report we did, there were 6 agencies, and GSA was one of them that we thought had a high number of closures with not high dollars in savings, and we asked those agencies to go back and look at their dollar savings. I think that there's just certain agencies that need to relook at it, and they might need a push, both from Congress with your oversight, from OMB. Hopefully we can help with some of that. I do think with the codifying the data center consolidation in FITARA, estimates now need to go out through 2018, and hopefully that's why I think the $8 billion savings on data centers, it's going to be a lot more than that if we really get serious about it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Scott, OMB's FITARA implementation guidance includes a data improvement program that provides guidance to agencies on how to improve their data reporting related to FITARA requirements. How will OMB enforce the requirements of the data improvement program?
So we do, first of all, a bunch of data collection, including quarterly standard data collection. And we've actually had a program in place for a while to try to improve the quality of that data collection that we do. And as we've gotten experience with that, and also working with GAO, we continue to identify opportunities. So this is one of the tools that I think actually FITARA is going to help us with, it, because it requires more transparency and visibility top to bottom in the agency. We now have an opportunity to get better data, and I think as any of these gentlemen will testify, this has been a great forcing function within the agency to sort of flush out of some of the hiding places where IT dollars were. So we have both experience in improving the data quality, but now I think we have the opportunity as the result of FITARA to get better data in the first place.
Okay. And what are the consequences if the agency does not make a data improvement plan or fails to take steps to execute a plan?
Well, we have a bunch of levers that we can use. We can leverage our colleagues on the budget side of OMB to help make sure the right things are taking place, and also on the management side, we have the President's Management Council. We have peer pressure, frankly, and then there's nothing like public exposure on our websites and oversight by this committee and GAO and inspectors general. So I think this is one of those areas where daylight will help all of us make sure we get the data and information we want.
I know someone mentioned a push from Congress, but is there anything else Congress can do to ensure that agencies are reporting timely and reliable data? And anybody can answer that.
Well, I think from my viewpoint, there's sort of no bad scorecard. We just have to agree on what the scorecard is and what we're going to measure in a uniform and consistent way. So there's no right or wrong here. I think the secret is consistency, and then we can drive for data quality in the things that we're collecting. And so I look forward to working with this group and others to make sure we're collecting the same stuff in the right way to then drive the right action.
Any other comments from anyone? No? I yield back the balance of my time, a second.
All right, the Chair, I think, did you want to comment on that? Okay. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Government Operations.
I thank my friend. By the way, Mr. Scott, in response to Ms. Kelly, so is OMB or is GAO going to be putting on their website these scores?
We hadn't made a specific plan for this dashboard. Frankly, we just saw it in the last day or two, so we haven't really even had the opportunity to discuss it.
All right. I would just suggest to you, respectfully, given your answer, Ms. Kelly, it would be perfectly consistent to do so. We want sunshine, and we want to, and we can always do it with the right caveat. But all right, Mr. McKinney, thank you for your statement, along with your colleagues on your right and left. It was not defensive. It was self-reflective. And boy, if everybody approaches this opportunity that way, the federal government is going to be humming, at least when it comes to investment, management, and deployment of IT assets. And it gives me great hope. So thank you for your statement. Very empowering. Mr. Powner, Mr. McKinney indicated that, in response to Ms. Kelly, that when it comes to data center consolidation, that's foundational. You know, absent that, we're not going to effectuate the kinds of reforms and efficiencies and savings we need. Got to admit, you surprised me, off by 3,000. It seems like every hearing we have, we discover another 2,000 or 3,000 data centers. You've released a report on your work assessing the federal government's data center consolidation effort. What are the challenges toward significant reduction and consolidation?
Well, I think you need to look at the current goals that they have. So of the 11,700 data centers that are being reported, agencies are only reporting 275 of those are core. Now, we're not going to consolidate.
Could you say that again? I couldn't hear you.
These are the core data centers. So these are the primary data centers that you really want to consolidate into. So there still will be these non-core that remain. But I think when you really look at agencies and you look at the number of core centers they have, that needs a closer look. And this is something we've discussed with Mr. Scott and some folks at OMB. They got some good guidance that's coming out on data center consolidation, what agencies need to do down the road, and that includes getting better estimates for fiscal year 16 through 18. But I really think a good hard look needs to occur with those core data centers, and is that the right number? And the ones that are non-core, what are we really doing with them? How many of those are going to be remaining?
Assuming we're able to get everybody on board with this consolidation, Mr. Scott, what happens to the savings the agency might effectuate? I mean, I think Mr. Powner said maybe $8 billion, maybe more, actually. Because Mr. Meadows and I have focused on this. We don't want to punish someone unwittingly by saying, great, you saved all that money, now give it to us. And we're going to do it, use it for some other purpose, rather than reinvesting in the enterprise in new IT assets or management thereof. What happens to the savings, and what, in your opinion, can we do or should do legislatively to help make that an incentive rather than a disincentive?
I think generally speaking what happens is it's at the discretion of the agency what to do with the savings, so the money may be reprogrammed for other efforts. But I think you're hitting at one of the core issues, which is for an agency CIO to undertake any kind of major reinvestment to replace an old, antiquated legacy system, which is one of the things we want agencies to do. There has to be some source of funds for doing that. And that source of funds may have to be more than what's available in 1 year or in the savings that come from other savings efforts that go on. Our guidance that we just issued for public comment, A130, suggests a new model for decision-making around software investments, including greater use of shared services, greater use of already existing technology that is modern and that the government has rights to, and a series of things like that that should begin to also generate additional savings. But fundamentally, we need to have a different kind of funding mechanism than is generally available today, in my opinion.
If I could ask one more question, Mr. Chairman, and then I'll yield, of course, to Ms. Duckworth. But one of the other features of FITARA is a management feature, which is to try to evolve into a meaningful hierarchy of decision-making when it comes to the title of CIO. The three of you have that title. How many other people in your agency have it, Mr. McKinney?
Well, we have 9 operating administrations, and each one of them has someone with the title of CIO.
CIO.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Shive?
When we started our consolidation, we had 27 CIOs. Now we have 1.
27, now we're at 1. Mr. Bagawala?
I have 9, sir.
9.
The Bureau CIOs.
Because generally when you ask even very large corporations, I do it as a trick question, by the way, how many CIOs do you have? And they look at me kind of funny and go, well, 1, no matter how big. Yeah, we have 250 people over 24 agency, or did when we wrote the bill. We didn't prescriptively say there shall be 1, because we didn't want to create resistance for you and your colleagues in trying to get your job done. But we're hoping that the agency, that over time, we kind of evolve to 1 individual who is infused with responsibility, accountability, flexibility to make decisions and to stick by them. Mr. Scott, final aspect of this one question. How are we doing in evolving that way? Sounds like Mr. McKinney's organization has done a pretty good job of doing that.
I think it's a little too early to tell across the Federal Government how we're doing. What we have seen in agencies' plans generally is some reduction in the number of CIOs. So there are definitely cases where somebody has said, you know, if this is what I'm going to be responsible for, I don't want the title of CIO anymore, and we'll give it to somebody else. And what we're looking for specifically is the overall governance framework. So we haven't specifically focused on CIO title reduction, but what we are looking at is, you know, where the accountability and responsibility flows and how it flows up to the agency CIO.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So now I'd like to recognize the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually was going to follow up on what my colleague was saying. Mr. Scott, I sort of want to look at this idea of the enhanced CIO authority and how it benefits the IT acquisition process. Going right back to what you were just talking about, the consolidation. One of the things bureaucracies are known for is turf battles. Having worked inside the VA, where there are some significant turf battles there, and watching that, and being able to see the IT come together under Roger Baker as a CIO there, I gained hope. Can you talk a little bit about the enhanced CIO authority and how that affects the acquisition process when you have this diverse number of alternate CIOs within each of the agencies?
I think there's a couple of things that have either been done or are in progress that will help this. So first of all, we're issuing broad guidance in some of the commodity IT areas, like laptops, desktops, servers, and so on, and so that there's much stronger sort of guidance in terms of how that will be done in an agency. And that includes transparency of spend and the plans in that space. Also, as I mentioned, this A130 guidance that we have out for public guidance is also more prescriptive for the agency CIO to say, here's the law, here's the guidance, and then measure compliance with those things in particular. Again, I think probably the biggest trick to all of this is making sure that the data is exposed in some way so that the agency CIO can understand what's going on. And frankly, that's going to be one of the challenges that we deal with over the next couple of years, is making sure that the reporting systems that we have capture the data at the right level, and then that's available to the agency CIO. In a big, complex agency, you might have multiple systems that gather that data in a non-uniform way, as Richard was talking about, and that's going to have to be dealt with as we go down the road here.
So, Mr. McKinley, do you see this as one of your major things that you're going to need to be working on as you go into the basement?
Yeah, I mean, the governance issues, yes, absolutely. I wanted to, if I could, comment on that, you know, about having 9 CIOs. Yeah. I believe that if we could get the balance between what ought to be studied for the department, and then each of the operating administrations have unique business needs, and I need somebody that As somebody whose job, sole job it is to focus on the alignment of the technology to that particular business, while the central office, my office, tries to manage that underlying utility. And that's not to say I wouldn't be involved in that, but what I'm saying is I need eyes into that business unit to understand their unique business needs. And whether we call that a CIO or an IT engagement manager, whatever we want to call it, I think that's the right balance point between the two.
Are you confident that the things that come out of central office, say the guidance that come out of central office, with or without concurrence from the folks out in the field are going to be carried out? Because one of the things I've seen in bureaucracies at the federal level is that lots of great things come out of central office, and then they get
Right.
slow walked.
Right. I have tried in the 2 years I've been at DOT to create a governance model where I, as the CIO, sit down with those modal CIOs, and that we have a true business council, that we have true governance and dialogue between us, that we make decisions together. So I do not want to be the central office that dictates out to the business units and they have no input in it. That won't work. What works is when people who have work together towards a common goal.
I would agree, but wouldn't you agree that at some point there are going to be some things that are going to be unpopular?
Yes.
That you're going to have to say as the
Yep.
central office, okay, this is the one thing you're going to have to do and suck it up?
Yep, yep. I mean, that's what happened during the cyber sprint that we did. That's an example of where I put FITARA to use. The OMB came out with these goals about privileged and unprivileged access, and DOT's numbers were way down, and I called all those CIOs together, and I said, we've got 30 days, and we're going to be at 100% of privileged, and we're going to get a high number on unprivileged, and we got to 97, and you've got 30 days to get it done, and they're not cutting us any slack, and I can't cut you any slack. And to our credit, 30 days later, we were kind of at the top of the list of departments that had tackled that issue. Now, we got a lot more issues ahead of us, but that's where the departmental CIO says, I've taken your input, I've listened, but here's what we got to do. And, a good CIO isn't bashful about making those calls.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize myself for 5 minutes, and continuing along that line of questioning, if there are members of y'all's staff that would enjoy coming up here and testifying, and we get to ask them the questions why they're not going forward on things, we'll be more than happy to do that. My first question, Mr. Shive, GSA got one of the 2 Bs out of the 24 CFO agencies, which were the 2 highest score. And one of the areas, now when we break it down and look at the data center consolidation, we graded you at a D, but if we did this on a curve, you're one of the better performing agencies on data center consolidation. Did you need additional monies in order to do that data center consolidation?
No,
you went from, the reported savings is $49 million, and y'all of the goal, and you've realized $29 million, which is 60% of that end goal. Did you need additional funding in order to achieve that?
No, we self-funded those activities. As a part of our IT consolidation, we consolidated much more than just data centers. We rationalized our applications, we rationalized our infrastructure, reorganized how we do business, and there were savings generated from that, and those savings were reinvested into data center consolidation.
And you were able to do that, you had the flexibility in order to do that. Is it because you have a unique budget authority as your role versus maybe some of your peers?
So no, I don't have a particularly unique budget authority. I operate largely out of the working capital fund, and that's what funded most of these activities. What enabled that was actually strong leadership at the top of GSA that made this a priority, and the fact that we got an early start on this.
Thank you. And now, Mr. McKinney, same question to you. The difference is y'all have only realized 1% of the savings of your goal. Why is that?
Well, the initial estimate that was provided, I think it was in the 2011-2012 timeframe, prior to my coming to DOT, I would have to characterize it as an overly optimistic stretch goal. The number that we reported subsequently to GAO, I think, reflects the true savings. I'll say this, that we have 15 core data centers, 3 of them non-FAA, 12 of them in FAA. I believe that we can get our 3 down to 2, a primary and a backup. FAA puts a data center in each one of their regions. The rest of our data centers are really telecommunication closets where there's a network router and a switch and maybe a file and print server for document caching. So our numbers, as far as the actual number of physical locations, is down pretty low. I think the other side of, that I would ask you to consider around data center consolidation is when we started this in 2011, we really didn't have mature cloud service providers that we could move our stuff to. So I think the key moving forward is not only do we shrink the number of data centers, is we move assets out of those data centers and up into the cloud. And I believe that we're going to be able to move.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
So
that's what we're going to do.
Now, do you have the authorities to do that?
Yes.
All right. And when do you plan to do it?
We're in the process of doing it right now. We just issued a contract.
When will it be completed?
How long will it take us to move it up? It'll take a few years.
A few years, and how much data are we talking about?
Well, let's see. I could give you an example. Probably by February, March timeframe, I'm going to move my entire messaging service up into the Microsoft 365
So
cloud.
are we talking
400 gigabytes of 400 terabytes of storage. We're going to make big moves, and we're going to also start moving just storage up there.
So is the length of time years to move data? Is it because of the volume of data? Is it because when you plan on implementing this, that seems like an incredibly long time in order to move even the kind of petabytes and terabytes of data?
Well, I'd like to think, I just don't want to, I don't want to get in the, be guilty of making an overly optimistic stretch goal. I think, yes, we can move fast. We are moving as fast as our technical teams are able to do it. And
so am I safe to assume that may be one of these projects that are associated with your major investments that are not being deliverables every 6 months?
Now I think you're talking about incremental development.
Right.
Yeah, that's another subject. I'd be glad to get into that.
No, it is another subject, but aren't those about the major investments that would this data center consolidation not be considered a major investment?
Yes, it would.
Right, and so you have 59 projects associated with 19 major investments, and only 9 of those 59 projects are delivering deliverables every 6 months.
Right. Well, many of our major investments are on the FAA side of the house.
Fair.
They involve the national airspace. Incremental development, which is often referred to with the tagline, fail fast, is not really deemed appropriate for development of technologies that are going into the national airspace.
But also on the flip side of that, I would think if we would try to be getting the best technology available to make sure that our FAA and our men and women that are flying planes have the best technology at their fingertips. So talking in terms of years versus months is one of the things that has been concerning to us. When we have people come up here all the time talking about, I recognize the difficulty of the task. Right? But the American people are tired of hearing it takes 2 years to do something that it would take any other entity less amount of time. And we can get into the details, and yes, that everybody has a unique challenge, but guess what? We still have to deliver. And one, I want to make sure you have the authorities to do that. But two, when you have those authorities, we're also going to hold you accountable on this area. Mr. Scott, in your written testimony, you talked about how many of the agency plans reflected a view that CIOs would not or did not have direct knowledge of IT goods and service acquisition. I recognize, your analysis of these initial agency plans, I think, has been one of the best insights we've gotten into this problem. How can we help you fix that?
I think there's probably a couple of things in the short run. One, as I mentioned, we have a number of these OMB guidelines coming out. And I think the development of the appropriate scorecards and measure in that space will help us measure progress in that area. And continuing to insist that IT spend be identified as a part of major projects and getting the visibility of that at all levels, whether it's at the sub-agency level or at the agency level, is super important. Another one to me is that as we plan and budget for things, that conversation that takes place among the senior leadership, the CXO, the program heads, and so on, that clearly identifies what the expectations are of IT in that particular case, is absolutely one of the keys. And so that's an area where we just can't take our eye off the ball. We've got to make sure we keep focused on it.
I consult with my colleagues, but that sounds like an area for a great hearing to discuss this topic and have some of those C-suite folks talking about why or why not CIOs are not involved in the procurement process. And the last question, and I've exceeded my time, I apologize to my colleagues, but this is for all of y'all. Welcome your feedback and thoughts on the scorecard. You know, we sit here and get to ask you all tough questions, and I would look forward to, and Mr. Scott, start with you. Were you surprised, concerned with the scorecard?
Well, I think, again, I didn't have a lot of time to look at it, but to me, it's sort of one of the ways to look at it is it's a baseline of sort of where we are today, and I think the hope for FITARA is to seize this historic moment and frankly, do things differently than we've done in the past. So to me, the real measure will be 6 months or a year from now, did we really move the needle on these things? I would love to change the past, can't do that, I haven't figured out any way, but you know, if we can really make progress in the next year or two, I think that's the real test. And hopefully the scorecard, you know, can reflect, you know, real-time progress as we go down the road. So as we work together, I'd like to figure out how we make sure we're getting more real-time visibility.
Mr. Bagawalia.
Mr. Hurd, I think, first of all, I think this legislation, we're excited because this legislation offers us the most promise since Klinger-Cohen to really allow us to do our jobs. In 30 years I've been in this business, I think this is the one that I think can help us because you're also providing the oversight to make sure it gets done. I like what my colleague, Mr. McKinney, said, that what gets measured gets done, and that's exactly what needs to happen. So I would just make two observations, and one would be that there's a little bit of definitional challenges as well, so we need time to process what the scorecards and things mean. But for example, on our portfolio stat, we did pretty well in some of the Agile, but we know we need to do much more than that across all programs, so that's an area we need to take a look at. And I think the other thing I'll just say is that as we go into acquisition, you know, there's going to be a partnership with other CXOs, so we got to really work together to make it happen. But I think this is a tremendous way to really get to the validation and verification framework.
Thank you, Mr. Shive.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. I appreciate the work that our partners at GAO put into establishing a benchmark and a baseline for us to start to measure success as we move towards FITARA implementation. I think that this is a great opportunity to start that discussion so that we can begin the work of refining how we measure success, and I look forward to being a part of that discussion.
Mr. Powner, I think I know how you feel on this topic, but I want to say that in my 10 months being in Congress, I've been impressed with the professionalism of GAO and the thoroughness of y'all's reports. So I'm going to give the last word to Mr. McKinney.
Thank you, sir. As I said in my opening remarks, I am so grateful to this committee for FITARA, but both for the accountability and the authority. You know, I want it both. And I sense your urgency. I feel your urgency. I have that same sense of urgency. As I said, I think this is our last chance to get it right. So I'm going to take what you've said to me today, the accountability that I feel very clearly, and I take it back to work with me, because I've been telling my colleagues that FITARA is to be taken seriously, that the accountability is real, and we can debate about the authority, but at the end of the day, the scorecard is going to reflect our accountability, and I appreciate it very, very much.
Well, Mr. McKinney, you can tell your fellow CIOs and your agency heads that many of them will be asked to appear before us. And Mr. Scott, I agree with you. There should be movement. This is the baseline, and if we're not seeing movement, I think these conversations are going to grow a little bit more uncomfortable. So with that, I'd like to thank our witnesses for taking the time to appear